Welcome to the Hot Young Designers Club podcast.
I'm Rebecca Plum, your big sister.
And I'm Shaun, your GBF.
We're not that hot or that young,
but we believe it's a state of mind that helps us build adaptable and profitable businesses.
We rely on the support of our design besties to get through each day.
So let's explore the emotional, practical, and humorous sides of being interior designers.
Welcome to the club. Hey, Shaun.
What's up, Rebecca?
We have a fun guest today.
Yes, we're welcoming Fred Nicolaus. Fred is the executive editor for Business of Home. Hey, Fred.
Hey, guys. How's it going?
Super good. I feel kind of legit. We have like...
a true journalist?
Yeah.
You also described me as fun. It's a dangerous thing to describe your guest as fun before they start talking.
I know.
You never know if they're going to live up to that.
Yeah,
billing.
that's like calling yourself cool. You have to let other people do it. So.
Or hot and young.
Well, we're all about irony around here. So. Okay, can you tell us a little bit about like what you do? We know you're with Business of Home, but kind of what your background is and...
Sure, yeah. So, as you said, I'm the executive editor of Business of Home. My background is also in my 20s when I was actually young. I'm not sure if I was hot. Other people would have to judge that. But in my 20s, I was a musician, and that was what I did with kind of my early quote unquote career. And then I got old, and I was like, okay, I got to do something that actually makes money. And so I was always kind of a freelance writer here and there. And I wrote for like Elle Decor and House Beautiful. I knew about the design world a little bit. And then this job opened up at BOH about 4 or 5 years ago. And I was really excited about it because, you know, I don't know if your listeners know Business of Home, but it covers the design world, but we do it in a sort of serious journalistic way. And it really appealed to me to be able to write about this world I know and love, but to do, you know, kind of real news stories as opposed to just describing beautiful rooms, which I like too, but it's, you know, one can get tired of it.
Yeah.
I think I do know that a lot of our listeners do listen and read Business of Home, but also that like for me, coming from like my banking business background, I like some of the more serious business discussion that can happen. And then also the like, here's the fun parts of design, like we just keep up to date on what's happening. So it is kind of that mix of the perfect blend of the stories that happen there.
Oh, thank you. We aim for the perfect blend. But yeah, I mean, it's funny because like, design is such a cool and interesting business, but almost no one treats it that way unless, you know, people outside of it don't think of it that way. You know what I mean? And so it's so cool to like get into the weeds and really look at how it works and understand why things are the way they are. And, you know, it's a fascinating business.
Right. Because I think we're going to talk about this a little bit too, but a lot of the top dogs in the industry aren't really that cool. Like, I feel like they seem very disconnected to us, you know, soldiers on the ground trying to make things pretty. There's an interesting, like, we always talk about there are so many women as interior designers and then so many men kind of running the like furniture game and stuff. So it just seems there's kind of an interesting disconnect too. So I think it's been really helpful as I've learned more about the industry to really understand it. Like, it's not just pretty, put cute curtains up. Like, there's a lot going into it.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm curious about who these top dogs are. I gotta have to tell me after the pod, after the mics are off.
I don't know. But yeah. Just like owners of furniture companies was mostly what I'm thinking. Like,
okay, gotcha. Yeah.
Or rug manufacturers. It's just a very...
Now I know you're thinking of a couple people in particular.
There's a very male-centric market of like who owns the companies, who are these wholesalers owned by. It's a definitely like a very, for me too, it's like a very cis hetero environment. Like,
yes.
You know, and it's specifically like still a lot of boomers running everything, which is different for us because when we're on the ground at like local designer showrooms, it feels like small boutique, feels like it's current. It feels like they're like more aware that they're speaking directly to a designer. And although they would probably love to do contract sales and get big stuff, they're also very aware of what like a smaller designer is trying to do to build their business. So it's an interesting dynamic the more that we've learned about it by going to markets and things like that, to see it play out in real time where they're like, you can see vendors at market who are like, oh, we only want we only want to talk to Williams-Sonoma Group. Like, we really just want to sell to them. We don't really want, sure, we have a small program for designers, but we're really set up to only work with these big retailers or big boutiques.
Yeah, well, it's funny you should say that, because I actually think in some ways, like the story, and we're talking about High Point here, like the story of High Point over the past decade has been a move away from that, what you're talking about, this thing of like only working with big retail buyers and moving towards designers. Because if, like 10 years ago, you'd go to High Point, and this is actually before I even started covering it, but just talking to people, you hear these stories about, showrooms would have these signs that say like no designers, like you're not allowed.
Oh God.
And what's happened is just that, like, as the retail business is kind of like small little local chains, mom and pop shops have gone out of business or gotten less powerful, and designers have gotten more powerful. A lot of businesses are trying, like a lot of wholesalers are trying to work with designers. It's just that, as you guys say, like culturally, they haven't really done it. They don't always know how to do it. There's often a disconnect there.
Mm-hmm. We feel it.
And some of them, yeah. And some of them, as you're right, still just don't think about, designers don't want to think about it. And it's still kind of a non-starter for them.
Yeah, there's not the respect. So in your opinion, like how and why do you think designers should stay informed in these industry goings on?
Well, reading Business of Home is obviously
Very
the number
helpful.
one. And listening to the Business of Home podcast featuring Dennis Scully is also a good way to do it. I mean, it's my job to stay on top of these things. So I kind of feel in the thick of it, and different people are going to get different things out of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like in some cases, staying on top of the news is really useful in a very like acute way. Like I'm sure you got, I know, Shaun, you were posting about Interior Define when they were having all those troubles last year.
Favorite.
Yeah. Well, like, so not to toot our own horn, but beep, beep, we broke that news. And for a lot of people who like were about to place an order with Interior Define, it's like helpful to know that the company is going through a really chaotic period. So sometimes staying informed about stuff is like actually useful, like in the minute. But other times it just sort of helps you navigate the industry, sort of understand what's going on. Like you guys are well connected because you have a podcast, but a lot of designers don't, network as much, don't socialize as much. And it can be kind of a lonely industry. And so I think it's helpful just to stay in touch with what's going on in kind of an ambient way to know where things are headed.
Agreed.
Yeah, I feel like your guys' new Thursday show, little plug for that, is a really perfect mix of news, but you guys seem more playful during those episodes. More relaxed. There's more banter. But I do like the frame when, like a couple weeks ago, you were talking about Bed Bath & Beyond and the changes in that company. And the question is always like, how does that affect luxury design? And sometimes you're like, I don't think it affects it at all. And sometimes there's like a lens to think about. So I think that specifically is super helpful.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because, like, I don't know,
like IKEA,
right? Yeah. Like you guys obviously know this way better than I do, but sometimes there is this thing in the industry where some bad piece of news will happen, or the economy seems to be cooling off, and you talk to really high-end designers and they're like, oh, it doesn't matter, my clients are rich, who cares? Like there's like that mentality, but I think that stuff does matter. And it's also important to remember that like not every designer is exclusively working with 3 billionaires. It's a big bad industry. And so I don't know. I think it's important to stay in touch with the goings on, but that obviously is what pays my salary. So I'm going to say that.
Yeah, I think it makes a difference too when we're like to like add credibility with our clients. Like I wouldn't want to work with a financial advisor who was like, "Oh yeah, I never read the Wall Street Journal, or I never look at I don't look at Bloomberg News or something." Like if they just said, "I only go off of my gut, I never look around at what's happening or read the market ticker," I'd be like, "Oh, this is probably not the right person. Like they're not really invested in it. And they're not going to be able to warn me of anything because they won't know it's coming." So I think in the same way, clients want to know like, what's the worst that I should expect? What's happened? Is lumber normal again? What's going on with lead times on appliances? Like keeping the finger on the pulse for that makes a difference, just to make sure our clients understand where we're coming from and that we do really care about our industry. It isn't just the fluffing pillows. It's about running an effective business. And I think it lends them the confidence that they need in us if they haven't been following along and don't hear us talking about it in other places. It's good that they hear that we're staying up to date too.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so, and I think like clients, the design industry and the furniture industry, a lot of people don't really think about it until they have to think about it.
Mhm.
So understanding that there is this thing called the supply chain that was crazy for 3 years. If clients sometimes stumble across a business film article and they're like, oh, so that's what my designer's talking about. So I think, it's the more information that the more people know, I tend to think is ultimately helpful.
So we talk a lot about, I guess, innovation and technology, and we always gravitate towards companies that embrace that and make things easy for us. We don't have to fax in orders, and which like I had somebody request a fax within this last year, and I was like, what is that? But so like back to kind of, I guess, these like boomer run companies historically, why do you think the design industry is so slow to innovate?
Yeah, it's such an interesting question, and I grapple with that one all the time, and I have all kinds of different theories about it. I think one thing is just that, like, we're gonna get a little nerdy and technical here, so forgive me, but like a lot of businesses where you're selling like a consumer good, like fashion, are really high throughput, right? Like Gap sells like 100 shirts a second or whatever it is. And each purchase is kind of low volume. Like if Gap messes up one shirt, it's not the end of the world for them, right? Like, or like if one little thing they do goes wrong. But like even a big retail company doesn't sell 100 sofas a second. You know what I mean? They're selling like a couple sofas a day. Or I mean, that a big retail company is selling more than that. But like, a high-end furniture showroom is not selling hundreds and hundreds of pieces a day. And so the throughput is very slow. And so I think that like what that creates is a culture where like every little thing that you do matters a lot and is really impactful, and there's not a lot of it. So it makes you kind of risk averse. You know what I mean? So like if I sell like 3 sofas and that's, $40,000, if one of those goes wrong because I tried some newfangled technique or whatever, that's like a third of my revenue for the year or whatever it is. So I think that like because of the way the industry is set up, people just are very hesitant to like take risks and push things forward and try something new, because if you try something new and mess it up, it may take a long time to find out, and by that point you've already sunk a ton of money into something that didn't work and you're behind the competition. So there's a lot of, it's also so relationship focused, and so like there's just a million little reasons why people don't push things forward a little bit. I am, of course, tempted to be like, oh, it's the boomers, it's all their fault. But I do think there's something just inherent about the industry that makes it a little bit like kind of slower to race ahead from a technological perspective.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's like the legacy of like a lot of them are family run businesses. So I think in general, those types of businesses tend to be, this is the way it's always been. Like, don't
mess with the formula. Like,
yeah. So like not a lot of innovators coming into the scene, but the ones that have done it like four hands, like just are doing it.
Yeah.
They like get it.
I know. It's funny though, because like I think I told this, Shaun, to you via DM, but like one of the crazy things, like, have you guys ever looked? There's like a chart that shows how wealth is distributed among generations. Yeah. It's crazy because like millennials are such a big part of the population, but in terms of the amount of like US wealth they control, it's like 6%. It's a tiny amount. So even though like technically speaking, millennials is this huge market, if you want to just like reach the rich people who control the money, like you're still talking to boomers and Gen X, which is, so I feel like it's weird because as like I'm like a very old millennial, but like you feel like there's tons of us. Like, why aren't you marketing to us? Why aren't you working in our way? But you realize that like the people who are really paying for super high end interior design are older.
Yeah, but I'm Gen X and I still want to use a computer. I think I'm more like millennial minded. I was like early adopter Gen X probably, but
yeah.
Okay, well.
So you guys think Four Hands is like one of the companies that's, because that's what I hear too, that they sort of figured out their system to work really well with designers.
It's so simple and everything's clear. It's easy to order.
It's easy to track.
There's issues, obviously, with any company, but they handle it like the damage rate is a little high, but they make good on it. Like I don't have to worry about getting screwed holding onto a dining table like I have from other companies. that I won't name, but really want to. So, and their photography is great. Like, I mean, they have kind of like a retail point of view that is helpful.
Yeah, I think like it's funny, the High Point thing where like a lot of those wholesalers are set up to deal with like Williams-Sonoma or, a big chain. I think the reason why is because it's the same thing. It's like if you can sell like a few containers to one person, that's a lot more efficient than selling like 2 sofas to 100 designers, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like what Four Hands figured out is that if you set up your tech really well, then you don't have to have like 100 salespeople talking to each designer. And so I feel like a lot of brands are like trying to move in that direction, trying to get their tech set up in a way that works so that they don't, they can work way more efficiently, in other words.
Hopefully.
I mean, when we find the ones that do, I feel like when we talk to designers, they're like, oh, I was so impressed with this because of that. And so they know that they're going to spend less time in procurement. They know they're going to spend less time having to negotiate, putting in an order with a rep who wants you to email an Excel sheet that you had to fill out. And so all those like little barriers just make it a turnoff to most designers because it's like, oh, this vendor wants to play hard to get, basically. And they don't want to do that. So we're just like, okay, unless it's a piece that's really fantastic, it's time to move on, and then find someone who makes it easier to work with.
Yeah, or like if things are back ordered or still on a boat somewhere, like you can see it, like Four Hands shows you that information. So like I can make an educated purchasing or at least a presentation, and they usually hit it. So it's just consistent.
Yeah, no, for sure. And it's yeah. The idea of the vendor playing hard to get is so funny. Like what other industry? It's like, let me beg you to buy stuff from you. It's such a funny like consideration. Yeah, no, I know.
It feels like that. Like, well, we're making so much great stuff. We're doing such great things, and then it's a 40-step process to get an account set up or to put in your first order, or then it's a crazy minimum buy-in that you're like, oh, well, okay, like. I guess it's just I'll go back to the dealer that you work with, and that just feels like counterintuitive to like shut up and take my money. Like I just
yeah.
What why do you guys think? Because I have my own theories, but why do you think like minimums are so persistent? Like it just seems like with the right tech, you can make the sales process efficient. Like, is it just that they don't want to deal with it, or like, what's your perception around why minimums are still such a thing?
I always think it has to do with freight. And I just think it just hasn't, I think the perception hasn't adjusted internally at the companies because we pay so much in freight. Like we've just absorbed it in our clients and have obviously, but I don't know, like they can't load a truck for under $1,000. Like the truck's getting loaded. What do they care where it's going? I don't know.
Yeah, this sounds like an article to me. I'm just really interested in it because it sort of seems like it's a holdover from the day when they're just used to doing business with the retailers and that's the way it worked.
Yeah, they just wanted bigger orders. Or, I mean, maybe in my hope of hopes, maybe somewhere along the line, they looked at an efficiency ratio and a productivity ratio within the company. And they're like, okay, unless we sell X amount per consumer, we end up just losing a lot on labor cost and internal admin costs or infrastructure costs. And then the profit ratio is too small that it just doesn't make sense to sell small volume. And maybe that was the case or still is for some of them where they just, hey, unless we move this much per client, it just isn't really the profit margin we want. I would, in my hope of hopes, that's what they've done. But I really wonder if they've challenged that. But then there's
tiered pricing. Like other companies have tiered pricing then. Like, okay, fine. I'm a small buyer. Like I'll pay more until I get my volume up. Like again, Four Hands nailed it. It's clear. It's like gamified almost. Like, when you're moving up the little.
Once I hit the next tier, then I level up again. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it incentivizes you to keep buying from them.
Yeah. Yeah. The minimum thing is weird. Yeah. I mean, I think, Shaun, they probably have done some version of what you just said. It's probably not quite, not sure they did it with like equations. They probably just kind of vibed it out a little bit. But like, I think it's also, they have the relationship with the dealer, which is complicated. The dealer might be like, hey, why are you selling to the person who comes into my store and blah, blah, blah. So that can get a little tricky too. But I think things are moving away from that and towards the kind of Four Handsy approach.
Yeah, or I've seen minimums getting lower where they're like, it's $1,000. We just want to know you're serious. If we're going to go through the effort of assigning you a rep who's going to talk with you, whatever,
Yeah.
you got to buy at least a dining table or a sofa. Like, we don't just want you buying 3 side tables and just go buy those on Burke Decor or something. Like, they don't want that, which I could kind of get. Like, we just need to know that if we're going to invest resources in you, you're at least going to buy something. Because I'm sure they do get a lot of designers who set up accounts but then don't buy, or they don't buy for a very long time. I feel like that's a lot of designers, is they get interested and then they wait. It takes a long ramp to get to that first order. It's probably the same a lot with like fabric houses, that they're shipping and sending us tons of memos, tons of stuff, way more money invested on that than our first orders of bolts of fabric.
Yeah, and they might also be kind of wary of like homeowners who've just figured out like how to get a trade, set up a trade account, that whole thing. Yeah, there's reasons for it too. I do love the thing of, look, just take us out to dinner first. We'll set up a trade account.
I know.
Buy a girl a drink, okay?
Yeah. Just don't leave us hanging. Like, we just got to know you're a little bit serious, and then we're willing to invest a little bit of time and do the second date. Like,
yeah, no, for sure. I feel like one thing that I feel like designers already are doing but should be doing is just figuring out a way to do custom that works for them, because just more and more stuff's going to be online. It's going to be so much easier.
mm-hmm.
That trend is not going backwards at all. So like, if you can find a way to get people stuff that only you can control the pricing and the message and make it exactly perfect for them in a way that's not onerous or complicated or $1 billion, I think that's like a huge advantage. There's a designer I talked to in Texas who actually opened up her own upholstery workshop just because she was like, I need a lot of this stuff. I can control the margin. I can control the timeline. Obviously, you have to buy it and staff it, but I thought it was such a smart move. Like, if you can swing that, it's a very cool thing to have.
I think it's going to keep growing. I know there's a lot of designers who are just making these libraries of every custom piece they've ever built or designed. And they're like, I just got to figure out the platform process of it to get it out there. And she and I have talked about that. The whole e-commerce of it all can be a really high barrier to entry for a lot of designers to compete with.
Yeah, for sure.
Because people want to see pricing and configurations, and you have to be able to put that online. But yeah, that's like a whole thing, which is now we're the boomers who don't want to
let's just stick to what works, guys. Let's get back to our faxes.
We don't need a complicated 3D model software.
Yeah. Good stuff.
Yeah, so if a software company were listening that was like, we already do this, but we need to make it easier for, a designer to configure, like, that's the stuff that I think we're missing, is the approachable side of a software that could be adaptable to a designer to create all of their own stuff that doesn't require, tens of thousands of dollars. It would be really empowering for, I think, a lot of designers. Instead of them having to pursue collections through large vendors, they could think about, this is my own stuff where it's not controlled by someone else. And the idea of a workroom, we've talked about that. Like, should we if I could afford to buy a drapery or a window treatment workroom, because a lot of them are older. They've had these businesses a long time. They don't really apprentice a lot of people underneath them. And I think there's a huge gap in, like, Rebecca probably doesn't like, I've talked about this a few times, so she might be getting annoyed, but the idea of, there are a lot of businesses that are owned by retiring generations. I know we're not going to just rag on boomers the whole time, but there are a ton of boomers who have built a lot of businesses that have a ton of wealth, but there's not a lot of platforms or ways for them to get in front of people who would want to buy and own their businesses. And unfortunately, that probably means that a lot of them at some point will just close up shop or trickle it off until they're gone, until they pass. But that wealth will just disappear. That business that already exists,
and knowledge
with all the clients and all of that. Like, there's no real easy way for those business owners to find someone who's like, hey, I own, an upholstery and a window treatment workroom. I'm 58. I don't want to own this that much longer because I want to retire, but I don't know how to find the people who are interested in owning it, buying it. I'll train them for 5 years and stay on board as like a president kind of. and then they can keep it. Like there's no platform for those out there. You just start, what do
So
you do?
like a
Ask
succession
around?
internship program kind of?
Yeah, you just like
Yeah.
what? Like post it on a Nextdoor page on Facebook or something? Like how do those
Yeah.
business owners find someone who wants to help them exit, cash out that retirement strategy, and know that it helps another new business owner?
I mean, yeah, that is a really big perennial problem with something like upholstery, right? Because like, the average 21-year-old doesn't see upholstery making as like a growth industry or a future, even though it certainly could be. It's just, it's hard for them to find people. I don't know if you guys know this guy Grant Trick, but he has like a great custom upholstery business, and it was based in Alabama, and he was like the only guy doing this kind of work in Alabama, and it was kind of like this great plucky story of like, he would find outsiders and weirdos to come work in his workshop and train them up, and eventually he just had to give up and move to North Carolina because he just couldn't find enough people to make what he wanted, and so I think that's why the industry concentrates around there, because it's like you need a critical mass of people who see this as a career and want to do it as a job. And I mean, there's that in LA too, of course, but it is hard for small workshops that aren't in a location with a ton of other like workshops to find people like that. Right. I don't know. It is kind of sad.
It's like that, but you basically have to be in a company town type again. Like,
yeah,
in order for people to see the value in it. I have an uncle who works for a flooring, I think it's Armstrong Flooring, and it's like the whole town is employed by Armstrong, like for like 100 years now. So it's just like everybody works there. They all know it creates their livelihoods. They care about it. Fathers and sons work there at the same time, like everybody does it. And it shows that idea of, okay, this is good, honest work that people need, that we want, but not everybody wants to do the hard work that comes along with it, because it is labor intensive. You are using your body up for this type of stuff. And we've kind of romanticized this office job mentality for a lot of people for a long time.
Yeah. And it's funny because what Grant told me when I did a piece about this, or maybe we did a podcast interview with him about it. And he told me like, you'd get people who come in and they were sort of interested in upholstery in kind of like a hobby kind of way. And they'd think that they'd want to do it. But when they'd like really see what the work actually was, they'd be like, well, actually, never mind. Like, I'm going to try and get in, I'm going to be like a social media director for Panera Bread instead of upholstery. So it can be a difficult sell to the next generation. It's funny though, as we were talking, I was just remembering, we were talking earlier about how like some sort of site or platform that tries to allow designers to make their own custom collections. There actually was a business that did something like that called, God, now I just remember it, Build Lane. Did you guys, I actually haven't looked at them recently. I did a bunch of articles about them when they first launched because it's an interesting idea, but like if they're still going, if they have a competitor, that's like an interesting concept for a business. I just don't, maybe it's hard to find the entrepreneurs who actually like want to make it happen.
They're still going. I haven't had anything quoted for a while, but yeah, I mean, I think as they were able to get more and more like localized manufacturers, that was going to help the pricing and ease of use. So we should look back.
Send them a fax.
Okay.
So because they're around, a lot of their workshops are here in LA, and so I know that they're like, for me, that's great, but I know that I'm sure they're trying to in that tech platform / startup-y phase where it's like they depend on that margin that they can mark up in between on pricing. Like for me, like you said, like LA has sort of this hub of still custom upholstery and manufacturing, which a lot of is beneficial for me because I can walk into an upholsterer, give them my sketch, and they can get started, and I can go back in a couple weeks and I can sit test it and double check it. And a lot of designers don't have that access. So,
but Build Lane did add a technical aspect that all those little mom and pop upholsterers don't have, which is placing my order online, getting feedback, getting sketches online,
getting approvals documented, because I've walked in on stuff where you're like,
land dates.
Yeah. Oh wait, you laid the pattern the wrong direction. They're like, oh, and they're like, I wrote it on the purchase order, and they're like, oh, I totally missed that. And you're like, dang. And then there is sort of you want the confidence, which is why a lot of designers end up back at large wholesalers is, oh, this company's not going to leave me hanging because they have the margin to absorb their mistake. And my small local upholstery guy, that's money coming out of his pocket because he still has to pay for all the labor to be done again and redo it when he messes up. Or if we're buying expensive fabrics, he asks me, he's like, how much is this fabric per yard? Because he's worried about
how worried am I?
Who's gonna fuck it up? Like, who in my shop is gonna work on this because there isn't a do-over if we do this, So he knows to ask that, but not everybody would.
Yeah.
So I think that working with a company where you feel like they can stand behind it and they'll still warranty it in some way and they know to ask the questions and document them, that's helpful when it's scary for a designer to do it, or if they're worried they haven't done it before.
Yeah, for sure. It's a lot easier to like yell at Wayfair and have them send you like 3 more sofas than it is to yell at your guy.
Yeah.
Who might not answer the phone because he's busy actually making the sofa.
So. He's working in the 100%. Shop all day. I mean, there's a lot of big changes coming. I think something that we wanted to make sure that we asked you about is we mentioned it sort of at the top of changes and shakeups with vendors and what's happening with them. And we don't like, it's not about naming names, but I think like for me, I noticed how like, I guess it was early last year, Hooker Furniture brought in Sunset West under their umbrella, and recently Global Views and Surya are like joining forces. But then there's also companies that we're seeing that are being lost, going out of business. And so it would be interesting to hear your thoughts on what is with the shakeup in all of that, or what are you observing or hearing about that's related to those changes?
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of those are like, they're different scales. Like I just wrote like a big piece about this company, Jean de Marie, that was like a really high-end LA showroom that went out of business. But that's like a very specific, thing. And, what's going on with like Surya and Global Views is a very different like scale. And, they're playing kind of a different kind of game. But I mean, I think like big picture, like as everyone on listening to this will know, the past 3 years have been like this incredible boom time for the business, because of the pandemic. Every company that makes home stuff was just, inundated with orders. Their revenue shot up like crazy, but that has really cooled off, especially for the retailers who are selling kind of to a slightly lower, demographic. And so I think like what we're seeing now is that like the tide is kind of washing out a little bit. And the people who, didn't have their businesses in order or were maybe making a lot of revenue during COVID, but their margin was terrible just because it was costing them a lot to make it. So I think we're firmly in this, post-boom period where people who didn't quite have their money right are getting washed out of business a little bit. And, it's a difficult time. I think the people that like emerge from like these couple of years will be really, really strong though, because there's a lot of, whenever other business, like weaker businesses go out of business, the stronger businesses that buy them up or take over that become stronger. So it's like a consolidation period, I think. Does that all check out with what you guys feel as well? Like, what's your perspective on it?
Yeah, I read your Jean de Marie article last night, and
that was a kind of a special situation.
Yeah, it was like more of a specifics about their story, but I did think it was helpful to hear how you explained kind of how you like the washing out, like how you kind of are working with money that's not really supposed to be spent. And then when the orders disappear, all the payments come due and vendors need to get paid. And
it's a whole house of cards
play
effect.
Money.
Yeah. I mean, the Shaun de Marie thing was, it's obviously very specific to them. I don't think most multi-lines are doing that, or most businesses are doing that. But like, it's like when you're getting tons of new business, it just papers over a lot of the cracks, right? And I also think COVID itself became kind of a shield for people. Like, there was so much chaos, so much confusion. It was not implausible to say, hey, sorry, your order is a year and a half late because of supply chain. Like that was very legitimate for a long time.
Right.
And so I think that like there are lots of people who use it as an excuse, and over time that excuse kind of goes away. All the new money coming in goes away, and then you just kind of hit a wall at that point. And, just got to hope that not too many people get hurt when that happens. But yeah,
it becomes really clear. I mean, having in my past life in finance, in wealth management, we would see that happen with businesses where they were like oh, they were just riding high on the good times. And the joke was always inside the bank, even that people can sell like before the bubble, it was like, oh, anybody can sell a home equity line. And then afterwards, when everything burst, they were like, only the people who are actually good at what they do are going to be able to do this now, because not everyone had equity and not everyone was smart enough to be able to help clients with financial decisions. But it was like when everyone was flush, you could get whatever you want. Anyone was buying whatever they wanted. And then as things tightened up, it's just this endless cycle of expand and contract. I mean, I'm not surprised that bigger companies or even mid-sized companies are looking to join forces or buy each other out, because I know that they're now able to negotiate even better shipping pricing, I'm sure, or freight pricing. It may make them even more nimble to be able to represent, particularly like Hooker Furniture and Sunset West. Hooker Furniture not really having any presence in outdoor. It makes sense to just, instead of start it from scratch and do all the R&D and create a whole new line of furniture yourself, here's a company that's already like positioned to do that, but needs more exposure. And you have more manufacturing capability than they do, or you have more access to it. Like that made sense to me of like, oh yeah, it's gonna build their whole audience now. They can see that many more people, and they can save cost. You know, if you're Sunset West, save cost on not having to have these expensive showrooms all to yourself. And now you've got this sort of bigger brother protection of this really huge company around you. So that's going to open up Sunset West hopefully to a lot more. But maybe, you know, for Hooker Furniture, they're hoping, great, now we don't have to worry about the cost of starting up a whole new outdoor furniture line. We've already got it.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's the mergers and acquisitions game, right? It's like, buying your way into a new market or buying your way into a new category. The only like weird, complicated, I mean, I think in another time that like you'd see like there would be so many more deals just like that. The weird thing is because of the banking crisis, like the Silicon Valley Bank thing, it's just making banks a little bit more cautious about lending money because there's just a lot of nervousness in the air. And so I had like a meeting actually with some M&A guys this is very nerdy, by the way. We can talk about gossip if you guys want at some point. But I had a meeting with some mergers and acquisitions guys at Spring Market, and they were talking about how like there's so many people who want to make deals right now, but in order to make it happen, you usually have to get a bank to loan you the money to facilitate the actual transaction. And banks are a little sort of tight-fisted right now. So I don't know. We'll see what happens, but it's definitely an interesting time to be sure. My job is busy.
I'm curious what your thoughts are on. So we know everything is going online, and online furniture sales and all that is not going away. But there is always I think a lot of designers' biggest fantasy is to have the little boutique with their little furniture line and their candles and pillows and all that. And like in Sacramento, where I live, we have no little small retail anymore. Very, very little. And everybody wants it, but it doesn't work.
Why does it specifically not work in Sacramento?
I just think people don't want to spend the price point that small retail costs.
Gotcha. Like the consumer base isn't there for it.
Yeah, and then they just get lazy and order it online, or maybe they would shop the store and then go find it cheaper somewhere else.
Yeah, like they look up the candle company and they're like, oh, it's on Amazon for $10 less. I'll just buy it on Amazon. Like they don't, they're not necessarily really wanting to support a small business necessarily. But they like the idea of going into the boutiques and the shops because there's unique things that they're not seeing in their daily life.
But I was even talking to my hairdresser actually last week who just got back from New York, and she said it's so different post-COVID. Like a lot of those small boutiques aren't there either. And like if it's not making it in New York, like we know it's not getting anywher. So
yeah, I mean it's a complicated time for that stuff, right? Because like physical retail is hard, and because everybody gets shopped, like you just said, that makes it even harder. In New York, it's kind of weird because the rent it's just like $1 billion an inch. So it's like that just makes it really difficult to make any retail business work. I will say, though, that like designers still do open up shops like that. We write about them all the time. I think sometimes it's a combination of like you can get better pricing from your vendors if you have like a brick and mortar. You know what I mean? So sometimes it almost like it's like for the design business, really. It's just that it's kind of sort of a retail business, but it's largely just like part of the design business. So I also think that post-COVID, like commercial landlords are a little more willing to play ball. Like there's a lot of empty storefronts in New York, and I feel like I think the $1 billion an inch pricing is maybe starting to budge a little bit. So I know what you mean, but I don't think the dream of the pillows and candle shop is totally dead. I think it depends on where you are and like how your business works. What about you, Shaun? Do you feel like the shop is still a viable thing or not so much? Or
I mean, I want to say yes. The trade-off for me is that it's the amount of money that has to be invested into having the inventory, making it look cute, keeping it fresh so people feel like, oh, I have to keep going into that store because something new is in there or something interesting is there. I feel like that's a big barrier for a lot of people to imagine. If they're like, wait, I could dump, you could easily drop $100,000 into a shop, like no problem. You could drop all that money in and still feel like I'm not going to see the return on that for a while. And I think maybe a lot of people don't have the stomach for that. I know that I think right now I wouldn't have the stomach to imagine that. But once you start moving in volumes like that, it starts to make sense because you're already doing that. Like for some of the designers that I know, if we're talking about the Amber Lewises of the world, or we're talking about like Kate Lester is local to me. And, they have found that sweet spot of they're putting shops in those sort of affluent communities where people will drive to those stores if they're not living in that shop because they have the household income, but they're also willing to hold it and they can handle they're not getting ulcers from holding the inventory because they know they're working on big enough projects to cover it. And I can't imagine that they would be going through the expansions they're going through without knowing that it's going to pay off for them. I think you just have to hit that critical mass.
They're also excellent marketers. Like you can't just open your cute little corner shop and put your sign up and
hope everyone shows up.
Yeah. No, I mean, I mean, Amber Lewis in particular, like she was really good on Instagram and you know what I mean? Like that, you have to, I think that's a good observation. I got a hot take for you guys. So the new cute shop with pillows and candles is like an Airbnb or like a vacation rental property that you like constantly redo as like a little workshop for your design business. What do you think?
I have this whole concept around this.
There we go.
We had a name for it, and it was like a shoppable home that you have like a little pop-up. It would be everything from the furniture to the wall covering to little jewelry in the bathroom, trinkets, robes in the closet. I think it's a really good idea, but I lost steam on it.
I hear you. Let's just do things the way we've always. We'll send some faxes back and forth.
But immersive and like I think helpful to see for people to see how things can actually be used versus beautifully styled in just a store.
It's like a store where people pay you the rent to stay there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's also like, because travel is back and hospitality is kind of booming in a way like where the residential was a couple of years ago. I feel like, I don't know. I feel it's also like, it just like you have a popular Instagram following so people know about it so you can market it to them. I feel like it's like a happy little flywheel if you can get it going.
You would just have to like merge it with that Amazon like touchless exit where anything that crosses the threshold is charged to your credit card.
That'd be amazing. Oh gosh, I'd love that. Yeah.
Loss prevention. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I think I just figured it all out.
It could sort of monitor how much soap you use. It could monitor the candle going down inch by inch and charge you by the wax.
You had 20 pumps of dish soap while you were here, so now you have to pay for that.
Exactly.
Everything's weighted.
Yeah. Sounds fun. Can't wait to stay there, Rebecca.
Yeah, it's gonna be great. You're gonna love it.
Yeah.
Well, so any new updates on AI that we should know about? I feel like we did an episode on it and it already feels like 100 years old.
I know, it's tough. It's like I should have checked the latest developments right before I hopped on. I mean, it's moving super fast. People are trying to productize it as fast as they can. Like there will be pretty good AI interior design products like by the end of the year and next year as well. I think at the end of the day, like you guys don't really have to worry about it that much because like if you provide like a full good service, then you're like AI it's gonna be a long time before it can do that. But I do think like e-designers are definitely in trouble, and
I've been seeing on TikTok this week. So Photoshop just dropped a new beta version.
Yeah.
And oh my God, all these product photographers are just freaking out because it's so good.
Yeah.
Even just wedding or portrait photographers, like maybe for like a couple years before someone can come in and undercut the editing side of it or the after.
The retouching game's over. Like there's no more.
Yeah, like you're not going to be able to charge crazy amounts once the consumer has figured out that they're like, well, just give me your raw images. I'll do it myself now. Because they're already used to editing images with, Snapseed and other quick apps on their phone. And now you've just added this other tool to it where most people are like, well, why would I keep paying for professional photography if they're at that level? But my hope would be the
photographer might still have a role, but it's just going to be very limited.
Yeah, or the upcharge on editing is going to start to feel like most people are going to say, hold on, I'm not going to pay you, this amount to edit my images when,
it's a click of the button.
It's a couple clicks, yeah. Or the presets are so easy, we know you're not spending a lot of time and energy on that anymore.
But like the new Photoshop stuff is like, I saw this one guy who he was a wedding photographer, and it was a church wedding with like this huge stained glass, gigantic, multi-faceted window behind the couple. But there was a big screen like cutting half of the window. And so he showed his retouch that he had done and, spent hours and probably days on. And then he did a quick select, generate.
Yeah.
And he showed it in real time, and it was better than his, and it took seconds.
Yeah. Just one, and I an idea around this that I sometimes think about is the idea that were people saying this when smartphones got really good cameras, like, oh, photographers are over because look at what good photos you can take with your phone. Like on some level, will what an AI edited photo look like just become sort of commoditized, and our eyes will get so used to it and to be like whatever, that it'll require like a human to come up with some new look or some new weird twist that we all gravitate towards. Mm-hmm. I don't know. That's my hope for humanity, but I'm not sure I feel totally convinced by that.
It's already kind of started in photography, like film editor or film photographers are becoming a new thing because it's old.
Yeah, well, it's
so there's craft to it.
It's like you can make something look really good, but it just becomes like a generic look because everyone can do it. So it becomes just the thing that you see all day. And so to stand out, you have to have the human to come up with some new twist, whether it's using film or editing in some crazy way. I mean, look, I really don't know, but this is just sort of my slightly optimistic take on maybe not all creative people will be out of a job in 3 years. I don't know.
They won't. I mean, we're creative. So yeah. And I think also there hopefully will be more of a backlash for the handcraftedness. So people who do hand renderings or hand drawings, you can see that work. I don't know that AI can do that. I mean, they can knock it off.
But it can,
good,
yeah, no, I know. But I think designer, look, at the end of the day, I think, you guys, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but the rendering helps sell your work. But what the job is just making it easy for the homeowner, making it a pleasurable experience and make it actually come to life. And the pretty picture is only a very, very, very tiny part of it. So I wouldn't worry too much if you're a good full service designer.
Yeah, I saw a meme the other day that said AI will never take over a designer's job because that would mean the client would know what they wanted.
Yeah.
So you have to put that into the input.
Yeah. No, I know.
Which is actually totally true.
It's totally true. Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think it may the client who already thinks they're a designer because they have a good Pinterest, it may empower them to think they're even better. But for real,
they're not a good client anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, then once we let them start getting started on their projects, then they'll realize it's so much worse than expected if you don't know what you're getting into. Or I've had some of those enthusiast clients do virtual consults with me, and they were like, oh my God, I totally messed this up. I just had someone this week who was like, this is the third tub we've bought for the house. And I was like, okay, well, I hate to tell you, but this tub also isn't going to work for your install method. A quick call with a plumbing rep would have helped you avoid this problem, but you were just like, I can figure this out. And, they couldn't, and it kept going wrong. Yeah. And their contractor has taken out three tubs now after halfway installing them, and they're just going at it again. And I'm like, we are spinning our wheels. You could have brought me in after the first swung run, but that's fine. I'll pay the consult fee and just point you at the direction.
Yeah.
But it's not as easy as it looks. And there is so much expertise that goes into it. Sometimes you don't know until you do it. And I think that happens with also us as designers. You're like, it can't be that hard. And then you realize, oh, never mind. It is that hard. I think my upholstery shop just made it seem so easy, or my cabinet guy just makes it sound like it's not that hard to do all this work, but I've figured out now that it really is.
100%. I mean, mistakes in this world are so expensive, and that's I keep cycling back to that point, but that makes it like, are you really going to take a risk on an $80,000 thing? You know what I mean? Like, it's a tough ask.
Yes.
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Not going to. Well, I am really, I think everyone, if you haven't been listening to Business of Home, start with the Thursday show.
Thank you. That's nice to hear.
Because if you just want, even like we were talking about at the beginning, like it gives you that little like cocktail party tidbit, like that's relevant to our business and our clients. But I don't know. I think it's also like educating people. All people need to kind of know what's going on because we all have homes.
Literally all people should listen to it is what I think my
okay, yeah.
my takeaway is. But yes,
it helps them know why we're expensive and why our products are expensive, like all of it.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you guys so much for having me. I love the show. I love how like real you guys are. There's a lot of design podcasts out there. And now I feel like I'm not going to name names, but there's like this. There's a tendency in this industry just to like pretend that everything's great and it's a luxury experience and nothing ever goes wrong or whatever. And I really appreciate how real and honest and open you guys are. And I think that's why it's a great listen.
Thank you for listening. That was really a nice surprise to hear that you do listen, because we want this to just feel like a safe place, because it's hard. It's hard doing what we do.
Yeah, for sure. I also want to be on the podcast because I've just crossed over the 40 threshold, and when I can be near the words hot and young and club even, that's where I want to be.
Just get it on the Google Analytics a little bit so they show up together, and then
exactly.
It might get flagged in the office though if you ever have.
Yeah.
Did you guys want to talk about anything else, or you want to call it a podcast?
We can call it a podcast. Do you want to tell any listeners where you'd prefer for them to follow along and keep up with the adventures?
Sure. Yeah. Well, obviously visit businessofhome.com. That's the site that I write for. You can get all kinds of, like, we publish 3 to 5 articles every day about what's going on in the design industry. We have a daily newsletter that goes out. You can sign up on businessofhome.com. And as Rebecca was just saying, we have podcasts as well. Just look for the Business of Home podcast wherever you get your pods. And the Thursday show that we've been talking about comes out every Thursday. It's a little confusing because you subscribe to the Business of Home podcast, and then you get that, which is an interview on Monday, and then the news show on Thursday. But you get everything you need from that one feed.
Exactly.
So that's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Fred, for being with us. We really appreciate it. It's a lot of fun. We know we're going to be in each other's DMs.
You were fun.
So thank you.
Love a good DM. I'm gonna get all the names of those top dogs, Rebecca, that you want to tell me about.
Okay. Oh, not a problem. She's got a short list already created that she's watching.
No.
So we're on it.
Well,
awesome.
Thank you.
Until next time.
Stay hot, designers.
Thanks for listening to the Hot Young Designers Club podcast.
For more on what we talked about today, check out the show notes.
Your support helps us grow, so share with your design besties.
And subscribe and leave a review on Apple Podcasts.
Our conversations continue on Instagram.
And be sure to download our monthly resources on our website and our Patreon.